The Auburn Express. You are now listening to the War Report Longtown Podcast with your boy Ike Jones.
What's up in War Eagle War Report family? It's your guy Ike Jones, and I am back stepping inside of LAUB Town. Today we are talking Auburn versus LSU, set to tip off at 5 p.m. inside of Neville Arena. Auburn taking its undefeated conference record and putting it up against LSU's undefeated conference record. A battle of the Tigers inside of Neville Arena tonight. Looking for a good game. LSU versus Auburn. Again, 5 p.m. tip. Currently, Auburn is favored by 14.5 in this game, and the ESPN matchup predictor shows a 92% chance for an Auburn Tigers victory. Leading scorers right now for LSU is the transfer Jordan Wright, who was previously at Vanderbilt, coming in at 15 points per game, 5.1 rebounds per game, and then Trey Hannibal is their leading assist man at 2.3 assists per game. Janai Broome, the current leading scorer for Auburn at 15.3 points per game, 8.5 rebounds per game right there for Janai. And the leading assist man for Auburn is Trey Donaldson at 3.7 assists per game. Should be a good matchup between the Tigers tonight. Two teams that major on turning the other team over. Right now, I believe LSU is leading the conference, if I'm not mistaken, in turnovers forced per game. So this is a team that is going to come in and they're going to want to cause havoc and make sure that teams are uncomfortable here in the matchup. So I'm looking forward to see what happens today, because Auburn right now is not doing so shabby as far as turnovers are concerned themselves. I expect a lot of what we saw versus Texas A&M versus Auburn, in that it's going to be a defensive matchup early until Auburn can really figure out what LSU wants to do. Texas A&M did some really interesting things as far as changing defenses pretty frequently against Auburn. I don't know that LSU's shown the propensity to do that, but I do think LSU's a little bit more physically gifted as far as their guard play is concerned and their ability to get out and get into some tempo stuff. So going to be interesting to see how Auburn is able to deal with a team that's built very similarly to themselves as far as outstanding guard play. They don't really have the guys down low that Auburn has as far as being able to get it to the post. So it's going to be interesting from that regard to see how they are able to deal with the fact that Auburn, I think, has the better offensive guys in the middle in the post. So just looking at the distribution of minutes per game for LSU, again, when you're talking about minutes per game, you know that Auburn's going to really be deeper than most teams. Two players, Jordan Wright and Jalen Cook, both averaging 30 minutes per game for this team for LSU. And, that's the vast majority. They're not really going to the bench when it comes to guard play consistently. They're trying to keep those two guys on the court at the same time. Then you've got Will Baker, Jalen Reed, the forwards there at above 20 minutes per game. And really, the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys are all 20 plus. And then you get to 7, 8, 9, and 10. Well, 7, 8, 9, 15 plus. And then their 10th man off the bench only getting about 12 and a half minutes per game. So, again, not the same kind of depth that Auburn would have, particularly not at the guard position in the way that we distribute the minutes. But they do have some quality guard play. When you talk about points per game coming from this LSU team right now, their top three players, Jalen Cook, Jordan Wright, Will Baker, all really guard types. And so they're going to really want to go and get downhill. They are not terrible at three-point shooting, a 32.7% three-point team on the season, which is decent, 71.4 from the free throw. They shoot a really good 46.4% on field goal percentage. When I say really good, that's they get quality shots. They're not a team this season that so far has been trying to force the issue with taking bad shots. What they do is really try to get you in transition and turn you over, very similarly to Auburn. I think if Auburn can find a way to get this into a half court game, and I don't say that much, but as far as being able to get back in transition and make sure that LSU is not able to get out and run, then Auburn can do a really good job of limiting what they like to do again, which is they want to get out in transition. It's not necessarily the transition layups, breakaways. They really do a good job of finding trailers in transition and getting some three-pointers up in transition. So they really want to speed the tempo up and not allow teams to get into their half-court sets so that they can start really running offense before you're prepared. So Auburn needs to do a really good job of getting back on defense. They have been porous at that times for portions of this season, and so that's going to need to be a big factor in how Auburn chooses to defend in this game. But this should be a defensive battle. Both teams are good at forcing turnovers. So let's actually just take a look at turnovers right now. Boom. Let's get to that. LSU forcing on average 21.9 turnovers per game. That is good for best in the SEC, followed by Missouri at 20.7, and then Auburn right behind, number 3 at 19.6 turnovers forced per game. So again, LSU is going to want to try to get out and force turnovers and be chaotic. Conversely, LSU is actually they turned the ball over at one of the highest rates in the league as well at 18.7. The only team that turns the ball over more than LSU in the conference is Mississippi State at 19 turnovers per game. So that's going to be the big differential right there, is really, can Auburn turn LSU over more than LSU can turn Auburn over, right? Because Auburn right now is actually number 2 in the conference at giving the ball away only 14.3 times per game. That's still high. Let's get 14 turnovers in a game is not really a good thing that you want to be able to see. But as far as SEC teams are concerned, Kentucky is the only team that turns the ball over less than Auburn at 12.8 turnovers per game. But again, LSU, though they're forcing over 21, almost 22 turnovers per game, they're also giving away almost 19. So Auburn's forcing almost 20, and if Auburn can hold true to their average while not giving the ball up the number of times that LSU wants to turn you over, that's going to be a key statistic in this game for the way that these two teams want to play defense. Who protects the ball the best, or who does the best job of being chaotic against the other team's ability to try to get to the basket and forcing turnovers. When you look at the three-point ability, I talked about it a little bit with LSU. They're shooting at 32.7%. That's actually bottom of the conference right now. Auburn's slightly better at 33.1%. But this is where Auburn has been really good this season, in my opinion, is the ability to defend the three. They have been giving some uncontested looks, so I expect for teams that can really shoot it well, like a Kentucky, or if you watch Dalton Connect today for Tennessee, that guy can fill it up. So if you're looking at teams like Kentucky or, particular players like Dalton Connect at Tennessee, I expect that they're going to shoot a good percentage against Auburn, because Auburn can get a little loose in their ability to defend a three and not give it away, uncontested looks. But I think strategically what Coach Pearl and his staff have done is they looked at what teams are doing well and saying, okay, we're going to make you be a three-point shooting team tonight. A team like Texas A&M that doesn't shoot the ball particularly well from three, they're saying we're going to give away maybe some looks from three because you don't do this well. I think you're going to see a little bit different strategy. That's why you saw early versus Texas A&M, Auburn comes out and they come in a zone, right? Because they want to show Texas A&M some different looks and be able to have guys with eyes on the rim. They did give up. I think why we switched out of that zone versus Texas A&M was just giving up too many offensive rebounds early, so you wanted more guys that were able to have eyes on bodies and trying to get to block out on the defensive glass, as opposed to trying to pack the paint against their ability to get the downhill drives. Did a really good job of still playing good defense against downhill drives once they kind kind of switched up to the more, switching man defense that they typically like to play. But switching the looks up and going into more of a zone is something I expect to see again today versus LSU. I don't know what percentage zone we're going to play because I don't think Bruce Pearl really likes to play zone a lot, but I anticipate seeing some zone in this game because LSU has not been great from the three-point line so far this season. So they're going to make those guys really if you're shooting it well, okay, we'll come at it. But I think LSU is going to have to shoot Auburn out of that zone at certain points, especially if they prove that three-point shot's not falling early. Against the 3 points, again, as I said, Auburn is second best in the league at defending it, forcing a 29% three-point percentage defense against right now. So they're defending against the three really well, second best in the SEC so far this season, only eclipsed by Mississippi State, who is defending it at 27%. A really great defensive league again for the SEC. Actually, when we're getting here talking these breakdowns of Auburn versus whomever, you're going to hear me say this is going to be a defensive battle a lot, right? When we get to talk about Kentucky's a good defensive team. When we're talking about Tennessee, good defensive team. Mississippi State, good defensive team, right? So you're going to have multiple teams this year that defensively can go out and create havoc and really want to limit your touches. They just play them a little bit differently. Like Mississippi State's not really a tempo team. They really want to play solid 30 seconds of defense and really force you into late shot clock stuff and bad contests versus a team like Kentucky that wants to get out and run, or a team like Alabama that wants to get out and run in transition, right? So we'll talk about all of those things as we get into those games more specifically, but more to this LSU matchup because I do want to continue down this path talking about what LSU does well. And let's zero in on our guy, Jordan Wright here. Jordan Wright here is his offensive rating, 110. That's pretty good. Usage rate of 24.8, which is pretty high. He's a pretty high usage guy, which is what I was expecting to see from his stuff. He's a guy that they're going to put the ball in his hands, and he's going to need really to feed off of the ability for him to, get downhill drives. He shoots the ball really well off the dribble. So 24.8 is a high usage rate. Their high usage guys are going to be Will Baker and Jordan Wright. So look for those two guys to have the ball in their hands a lot. Will Baker is the center for that team. So let's just kind of take a look at Will Baker a little bit more. Averaging 23.7 minutes per game and 11.8 points per game for LSU. Somebody who Auburn fans are probably not as familiar with, the senior forward there for LSU, 7 foot 245, right? So he's a guy who definitely presents some size for Auburn down low. He is averaging right now almost a block per game, only getting 1.9 personal fouls per game. That's going to be interesting to see how that plays out for him in this game, because I expect Auburn to try to get down into the paint and force him into some action or, really high screen and roll and try to get him involved. It's going to be interesting to see how LSU decides to deal with the high screen, especially if he's going to be guarding Janai Broome out high. How Janai deals with that. This is going to be an interesting game for Janai going up against a true 7-footer as well, right? Janai has not, from the post, really had a ton of opposition for two halves of basketball. He's been struggling early in a couple of games, but then later in games, he seemed to kind of have his way. A true 7-footer out here versus Janai is going to be interesting, a guy who's a pretty high usage person for them, so they're going to be running a lot of their low post action through him. As far as rebounds per game, and this is just on the road, but his total rebounds per game, only 5. That's interesting. He's only averaging 5 boards per game as a true 7-footer. So maybe a little finesse. I haven't watched a ton of LSU basketball this year, but I'm surprised that a guy who's averaging the minutes that he is only averaging 4.9 rebounds per game for them. He can step out and shoot it, though, shooting 30% from 3. Let's take a look at kind of how he's getting those shots. How often is Will Baker shooting threes this season? He has taken 23 three-pointers this season, made 7. So he can step out and shoot a little bit. He's not a a guy who I would consider that's going to shoot a bunch of them. But unlike Jordan Wright, again, Jordan Wright's a scorer here. He shoots 225 on the season, or he has shot 225 3-pointers on the season. And he's shooting a 35% clip. So definitely going to be a focal point, I think, for Coach Pearl and the team defensively is going to be a guy, Jordan Wright. So I would look to see kind of how he's getting into the flow of the game. I feel like if Auburn can take him out of the flow, as high a usage guy as he is, it's going to gum up the works for what LSU wants to do offensively. They're going to try to feed off of what he's doing. He's only averaging 2.1 assists per game. So, again, not a guy who is really going to be factoring in as a playmaker primarily, but Auburn's going to try to force him to be a playmaker, make the right plays out of things, and make sure, he can get his whatever looks he's getting, they're not comfortable looks for him. But at 6'6", he is able to shoot over the top fairly well. So, going to be interesting to see, again, how Coach Pearl decides to play that young man. All right. That's enough of me talking for right now. I do want to get into some of your comments. I appreciate you guys dropping in here with me. We'll get it started with Jonathan Boyson, who says, "What's up? Can't wait to see Auburn. I agree with Mike G. This is Pearl's best team." I'm not going to ever say I agree with Mike. No, I agree with Mike often, except when he says something that's crazy that doesn't need to be agreed with, and I vehemently disagree with him. But he did make a good comment about Bruce Pearl having a really good basketball team this year, so we will give him props to that. Corey Weaver says, "Love to see Broom dominate the paint tonight." Here's the thing. I think people get caught up a lot. I don't think he had a good first half at all versus Arkansas, right? So I think he wasn't in it defensively. Offensively, he wasn't taking good shots. His second half, he came in a lot more focused. They did a really good job of putting him in good positions to get buckets there. But I think people got caught up in his lack of offensive scoring in this previous game versus Texas A&M and didn't look at what he was doing on the glass and what he was doing defensively to kind of control the painted area. I think he had a much better first half versus Texas A&M all around, even though the points didn't show it. But I do want to see two good halves from Johni Broome. I would love to see him come out early, put some pressure on the bigs there for LSU, and have them try to figure out how to deal with what he's doing. I do expect LSU to focus in on keeping Johni Broome contained, though, in this game. Jonathan Boyson jumps back in, still waiting on Holloway to get going. It took Jabari getting into SEC play his freshman year. Jabari, I think, showed some signs of life early. And the way that the team played around Jabari is drastically different, right? Jabari wasn't a ball-dominant guard, right? He had to wait for someone to get him the basketball, and they were struggling to find out ways to get him the ball in places where he was comfortable because Jabari was never going to be this ISO guy, right? He operated out of the high post, and teams were trying to take that away from him, so they try to get him in some trailing action out of some pick and rolls. They took him out of the pick and roll, which they were doing a lot of pick and pop action with him early in the season, and they switched that and started going pick and roll with Walker Kessler and having Jabari either in the dunker or in the away spot from the three, and it made it difficult for defenses to figure out. They gave more spacing for them to operate and get downhill until teams started just doubling the pick and roll out high against the smaller guards. That shut down a lot of what they were doing. But it was, I think, Coach Pearl and company found a different way to get Jabari involved. With Ayton, it's a little bit different, right? Because he's a guard, the ball's in his hand a lot more, so he needs to figure out how to play within the flow of the offense. I think he's done a pretty good job overall of, his assist-to-turnover ratio is pretty good. He just needs to take better shots, I think. Sometimes he falls in love with the fact that he can shoot those deep shots and not really realize that it's not needed in order for you to get into the offensive flow. So I'd like to see him get downhill a little bit more early in games, maybe get to the mid-range a little bit more to find his availability for that open three-pointer once you prove, hey, I can blow by you if you're going to just step out here, or if you're going to give me 5 feet from the, let me just get downhill on, some of that P&R pick and pop action or something like that and allow him to get downhill. I think they need to see that a little bit more. Corey Weber says, Jay Will is playing like a different dude this season. Absolutely agreed. He is doing an excellent job. This is the Jay Will I think a lot of Auburn fans wanted to see. More confidence, and he hasn't, spilled over into the area where he's taking bad shots, right? So he's confident. He's stepping up and taking shots that he should take, but he hasn't gone over into taking bad shots. So definitely looking forward to seeing how he continues to mature in his graduate year here at Auburn University. Don Cullen says, yeah, he has really come on, and I'm excited for him. Speaking of Jalen Williams, another is CBM. That's Chad Baker-Mazar. He adds a lot of energy to the game. Love what I see from Chad Baker-Mazar. Been singing his praises from the very beginning. I was really high on him coming into the year, and he has done everything that I expected him to do. Coming off the bench, igniting, being able to be a 3-level scorer for Auburn. His mid-range game is probably one of the best on the team, and I love the fact that he consistently gets to it, but he can also step out and shoot the three or get to the rim. Didn't have a particularly great game against Texas A&M offensively, but I love what he did as an impact player on defense, and then just some timely things on offense to be able to get buckets for Auburn. Again, showing the depth of this team. Don Cullen again. KD is playing much smarter, but when the game needs a major car wreck, the rolls through. Let's see. KD is playing much smarter, but when the game needs a major car wreck, the rolls through the lane and either scores or gets fouled. I love that. Or maybe he rolls through the lane and either scores or gets fouled. Listen, I love what KD Johnson is bringing to this team this season, and a much more mature shot-making guy out there. So, and a better playmaker. He still has his moments where I'm just like, yo, KD, what are you doing? He had the breakaway versus Texas A&M where he clearly should have given the ball up, and he is going out there trying to make the layup ahead of the defender, and there's like two other guys there. If he just drops it off for one of them, it's an easy layup. Auburn ends up not getting the bucket on the missed putback by Chaney Johnson. And then now KD does end up getting the steal on the other end and then getting the dunk right after that. So we didn't cost Auburn any points in particular there. But, just certain situations where, he's still, particularly on the break, probably should give the ball up a little bit more. But he's done a much better job on post-entry this season and done a really good job of finding his teammates out of his drives into like maybe a corner kick or something like that. So like what I'm seeing from KD Johnson, the playmaker, a little bit more this season. Wizard Dragon jumps back in and says, this is Bruce's most balanced and deepest team. I agree. I don't think that there is a team that Coach Pearl has had for Auburn that could go 10 or 11 deep, and you don't feel as if there's really a liability out there on the court. There are, of course, players who are better offensive threats, and so you get into some matchups where you're like, okay, I don't know where the scoring is going to come in this lineup, but there are 4 or 5 guys that in any given time can go and get you a bucket, right? And he hasn't shown it yet, but Aiden is definitely a guy that should be a bucket getter for you. Denver Jones, a bucket getter for you. All right, Janai Broom can go get you buckets. You get him down there in the post and let him go to work. He can get you buckets, right? You can get Jay Will to get you a bucket. Chad Baker-Mazar, get you a bucket. KD, get you a bucket, right? That's something we haven't been able to say. I think Wendell Green got a lot of flack during his time at Auburn for being a ball hog or anything of that nature, but there weren't a lot of guys who you could just put the ball in their hands and say, all right, go get me a bucket outside of Wendell. Because Alan Flanagan, up until the end of last season, really hadn't been that guy for Auburn, and he worked his way into that. KD Johnson had not been as under control as he was towards the end of last season. So he's a guy who could go get you a bucket, but he wasn't being utilized, I think, the way that he wanted to, and that kind of took him out of some games. This year, there's just so many guys that you can say, hey, I need a bucket from you, go get it. And they can go and deliver that. And so this definitely balanced and deep is a good way to look at this team. It's like there's just so many different ways that this team can attack you offensively that it allows for you to not feel anxiety about, this collection of 5 guys, how is Auburn going to score with this collection on? Like it's been really good. I didn't even mention Trey Donaldson, who has been working on, he hit a really tough, spinning fall away jumper late in that game when you needed a bucket. Trey can go get you one, right? So Trey has been very much more a pass first guard than he has been looking to score, and which, Auburn needs that. They need somebody who's going to be a floor general, which is why he's closing out games right now, because there's enough guys who can go get you a bucket. Trey doesn't need to be that guy, but if he has to be that guy, I have confidence in his ability to go and do that, and I think he's determined. We talked about this. Somebody asked, I think, in Facts or Not on Friday, whether or not this is going to be, a player of the game type of stuff for Trey, and this is the kind of game I think that he can do that in a game where he's going to need to play heavy minutes against a team that's going to want to pressure you. I think think Bruce Pearl's going to trust him with the ball in his hands, and I think he's going to make some good decisions in this game because I feel like he didn't feel like he's been shooting his best, and so he's going to come out here and try to prove that he can be an offensive threat as well, so that he can continue to contribute in every way for this team. So looking forward to seeing what Trey Donaldson brings out there tonight. See here. See Tatiana jumping in here. Thanks so much for jumping in. Don Cullen once again says, I think the last game showed us just how much of a determined team this one is. They will go deep into the tournament with this tough fighting spirit. This is the kind of team that you can put some high hopes on, right? I think the last couple of years, people were down on Auburn's prospects for getting to the tournament, making a deep run. The Jabari Walker team, or the Kessler Smith team, whatever you want to call them, that team people thought could really go pretty far, and they ran into a buzzsaw in Miami there in the round of 32. I think the fatal flaw for that team was just the inability of multiple guys to be able to score effectively with the ball in their hands, right? As good a talent as Jabari Smith was, he wasn't really just give him the ball and get out of the way type of guy. He really needed more space to operate, and he was really more effective when you got it to in the high post and he could just turn and shoot over guys. But that Miami team had guys who could contest, and he hadn't really refined his ball handling to be able to just kind of get into shake mode. It was really, he needed 1-2 dribble pull up type of stuff, and they were defending that well. Walker Kessler wasn't that guy. So the best players on that team were two post guys who you couldn't just give the ball to in the post and have them go dominate a one-on-one matchup if you cleared it out, or be able to pass well out of that, which I haven't talked about Janai, and how much better he's passing this season out of double teams. But that's something that we'll definitely look at as we get into some film stuff. But that's not the case for this year's Auburn team. This year's Auburn team, as we just said, there's multiple guys who you can just say, all right, we're going to clear it out. Now you go get us a bucket. Bruce Pearl trusts his point guards in those moments to make the right play. So you're still seeing a lot of 1-4, 1-5 pick and roll action late in the shot clock to do that. But you have multiple guys who at any given time can dominate their one-on-one matchup, ball in their hands, and go get you a bucket. And I love the ability for this team to do that. And then you've got some guys who can confidently step out and shoot. Denver Jones needs to get on track a little bit with his ability to shoot. He's been up and down this season. He'll play some good games, and then he'll fall back. I want to see him knocking down the three more consistently out of that swing, or out of whatever they're doing in that roll action, or the curl action, I should say, that they're doing out of the high screens with the ball handoffs. I think he shoots that well. He needs to shoot that a little bit more consistently. And then, of course, we talked about Aiden Holloway. He can be a catch-and-shoot guy, or he can be an off-the-dribble three guy. And we're going to need that as teams start to dare Auburn to shoot the ball a little bit more. And I expect, LSU might come out and play a little zone early, just because I don't know that they really have, when you look at LSU's team, let's go back and look at them statistically on the season. They're averaging, again, only 4.3 blocks per game. And there's not a single person on this team who's averaging more than one block per game, right? That's not the case. Janai, averaging 2.1 blocks per game for Auburn, right? And as a team, averaging 5.6. So Auburn defensively can defend the paint, and they can really make it tough for people to get shots in the painted area. So I think LSU, knowing that they're not necessarily as equipped to have that kind of matchup with Auburn, is going to want to pack the paint and play a little bit of zone to try to force the three-point shot. Auburn having the edge, and let's just kind of look the head-to-head. Auburn has the edge in points scored, averaging 83.5 points per game, while LSU is only at 76.2. Auburn's giving up less points per game than LSU at 64.9. LSU giving up 67.9, which is a good spot for them to be in. And then from a field goal percentage, Auburn shoots it better from the field, has more rebounds per game by almost 4 boards per game, averaging almost 7 actually assists more per game, a full block and a half more per game. Now, LSU has more steals. Again, we talked about they do lead the league in their ability to force turnovers. They're stealing the ball at a rate of almost 3 more per game. But Auburn statistically is the better team in this. Now, LSU has gotten better since they've gotten their new transfer, some eligibility here. But I do think that Auburn holistically is equipped to be a little bit better, again, from the depth standpoint. Once you get into their bench, there's going to be problems for LSU maintaining whatever momentum they've built up. So you're going to probably see a lot of guys play some heavy minutes for them in their from their starting lineup. I think it's the foul situation is going to be one that you really want to monitor. Can Auburn get to the free throw line and make their free throws, but can they get LSU in foul trouble where they're going to have to rely more on their bench guys to give them heavy minutes? And that's when Auburn's really going to be able to ratchet it up and extend leads if they have one, or overtake it if they've fallen behind in this game. So looking for a really good matchup today versus LSU. Looking for it might be ugly and sloppy at points during this game for Auburn. Auburn has fallen into these spaces during games where they're just not being efficient. So looking forward to seeing what Auburn is able to produce as far as some more efficiency and not really having the silly turnovers, right? Like if LSU is going to play really good defense, that's one thing, but I don't want to see silly turnovers in this game because LSU is a team that feeds off of that. You can't feed them their diet. You need to force them to eat something that they're not accustomed to. So looking forward to seeing how Auburn shifts and really turns this game into one where LSU is uncomfortable and they start pressing to try to do certain things, and maybe in particular pressing, right? Like having to go to a full court press to try to speed Auburn up. So hopefully that will be the case. Auburn's able to stay away from the live ball turnovers and really get efficient in the paint, making LSU feel like they have to go to a zone to be able to get away from the fact that we're doing really good. If LSU goes to a zone, I look for Chad Baker-Mazara and Jalen Williams to eat in this game. If they're going to go to the zone, those are the two guys I think they're going to be the most effective at busting that zone because of how they can flash the high post, particularly Chad, because I think he's a little bit better passer than Jalen is. But Jalen is such an effective scorer once you get him into that high post spot. If he's on today and they're forcing him into that zone, those are two guys I really expect to go out there and dominate for Auburn. So looking forward to this one. Score predictions. Again, I don't necessarily do them, but I do want to see what you guys feel is a score prediction. The first one here from the Tool Main. Tim the Tool Main Taylor says he's expecting an Auburn 14-point victory. You want to put some numbers on that? Like, how do you feel like the score is going to pan out? Auburn in the 60s, Auburn in the 70s, Auburn in the 80s. If Auburn's in the 60s and they win by 14, this is utter domination on defense. But expecting like an 80 to 60-something point game. 78-63 says Corey Weber here with an Auburn victory. That's a pretty good number. If I were to put numbers on this, just kind of based upon really just only statistical analysis, let me see. I'm going to think about that for a second. I want to get you guys' thoughts here on what you think the outcome of this one is going to be. Jonathan Boyson says that he thinks 87-65 in favor of Auburn here. Wizard Dragon gets 91-76, but I'm where it can go very bad. Hey, listen, it can go bad, but we ain't worried about that. We're gonna get into what we think is gonna happen well for our squad. So I'm with that one. Let's see here. Susan Scales expects a close game here, 70-62 in favor of Auburn. Tim jumps back in, 83-69. Good guys win. I like all of those predictions. Of course, nobody's predicting an Auburn loss, and I am very much happy to see that. I think this could be a close game. I think Auburn wins this game pretty similarly to what we saw versus Texas A&M. I think maybe just a little more scoring in this one. So I think I said maybe it was going to be an 80s and 70s contest. I think we're going to be in that space again, an 80s and 70s contest where Auburn is in maybe the mid 80s and LSU is in the low to mid 70s in this game. If Auburn protects the basketball, though, this could get really ugly for LSU really quickly because I just don't think I don't think Auburn wants to turn this into a track meet, and neither does LSU. But because I think Auburn can score more from more places than LSU can. But if it is a gritty, physical turnover fest, I think that still favors Auburn and their ability for depth to get into that second wave and start turn them over a little bit more. So, yeah, a mid 80s versus mid to low 70s contest in the favors of LSU. All right. Good question here from Corey before we get out. Has any current LSU player been in the jungle yet? Well, I guess the Vandy transfer has. It's an intimidating environment. That's a good question. I mean, LSU is composed of a lot of young players and a lot of transfers as far as their heavy minutes. Again, Jordan Wright, as Corey stated, has come and played in the jungle. If any of these other guys have, then they haven't played very many minutes there. So it is going to be a different type of activity for them to be able to come on the road and play in the jungle, and the environment can be a very big benefit to Auburn. So looking forward to seeing how Auburn deals with all of those things. Before y'all get out of here, make sure you are sharing the content, subscribe to the channel, all of those things, and we appreciate it very much if you do that. Give us a thumbs up on the video, and we will see you in the post game after Auburn is done today. But we definitely appreciate everybody dropping in with us. Until the next time, and as always, War Eagle.